There's nothing weirder than walking out onto a stage, not having your talk, and hoping that Stephen's going to come and hand it to you. That's great. My name is Junius Johnson, and I am a tour guide to other worlds. My goal today is simple. It is to remind you that you are too big for this world. Because if I can make you remember that, I think it will free you up to love this world. It will free you because you will no longer have to ask this world to be more than it can be. And so you will rest content with what it actually is. And the reason I want to do this, I don't want to talk about your art. I don't want to talk about making art. I don't want to talk about all these other sorts of things. The reason is because for every Christian, not just the artist in the room, but for every Christian, the first art of the Christian is their witness. It is your life. And so the other art that we as artists produce comes out of that first art. And so if we're gonna superpower that, then we've got to start with our hearts. Well, our story began before there was any beginning. The clay out of which we were formed is not the first truth of our being, just as the clay itself has a truth that is much older than the separation of the seas from the dry land. The meaning of humans is not clay, and the meaning of clay is not clay. For before there were stars to shine down on an as yet unformed world, our story had its beginning. Before he called upon light, before he even made the world, we were there with him in the mind of his eternal word, the archetype of our being and the ground of our intelligibility. He saw the world before there was a world, and he desired it. He saw us before he made us, and he longed for us to be. Before the beginning, when he was, we too were, in the perfect gaze of his divine inner eye. I was reading the Psalms a couple of months ago, and I came across this line that just floored me. It says, "The Lord saved me because he wanted me." It's crazy. And then, this all-sufficiency willed not to be all that there was, and called a world into being. Not out of nothing, as if there were a palpable void that he shaped into our being. No, rather, using nothing as material at all, he formed us. He formed us out of his concept of us, out of his idea of us. We are not shadowy wraiths called from the nothing, or cosmic tricksters summoned out of chaos. We are like Athena, springing fully formed from the mind of God, the eternal Logos. Our beginnings are not archaeological. That's just fumbling after effects. They aren't even historical in the sense in which we normally use that term. They are mythological. That means they are outsized, beyond the proportions native to this world. Do you see it? We are older than the world. We were conceived in wonder, and we came forth in wonder into a world of wonders. For in those early days, if you did not guard your steps, you might stumble across the flaming cherubim, whose wings scorch the sky in their earnest warning to turn back, for the way forward is barred to you because of your trespass. Giants walked the earth, and so, gazing into the distance, you might see a towering shape of magnificence and incomprehensibility striding across the landscape like a lord of creation. And our own powers were the stuff of fairy tales. We had the lifespan of elves. And in his thousands of years, each man might see his progeny to the 7th or 8th generation. We raised a tower at Babel that in its description sounds more like a space elevator than a ziggurat. In those early days, we also saw the great judgments of legend, with the people struck with a curse of incomprehensibility, the guilty branded by divine power, the very end of the world, a liquid Ragnarok from which a new world was born, new in more ways than we remember, a world of new possibilities, including, for the first time, wine. Cities were overthrown in fire in a single night. The waters parted like a curtain. The sun stood still, and dry bones received back their flesh. This is history. This happened in the world we inhabit. I've never read a wilder fairy tale than the description of the world we live in. These early centuries and millennia of our lives in this world taught us to dream. Out of the memories of the wonders we had seen, we dreamed up more wonders. We gave ourselves the unicorn, which is as far from a horned horse as a dragon is from a flying snake. We conjured the manticore and the Pegasus, the kraken and Scylla and Charybdis, the Holy Grail, the dream of Camelot, and the chiefest of calamities, the dragon of fell name. We created none of these, for they too were seen in the mind of God before the beginning and willed by him to exist. Everything in the world is older than the world, even our fantasies. But when God willed that these things exist, he willed that they not exist apart from our dreaming them. And so he hid them as Easter eggs or precious treasure in the creation for us to find and bring to light. That's looking backwards. Let's look forwards. Our destinies stretch beyond the end of the world. For the end of the world is just the beginning of the next stage for us, an eternal journey of joy or sorrow, according to the choice we made in using our power of self-molding. Did we want to be like God? Or did we want to end up like Satan? That is, did we want to live a life outside of ourselves, a life of radical and ecstatic gift of self? Or did we long to be shut up within the prison of the self, needing nothing and so lacking everything? We are choosing right now, this second. And on Judgment Day, those choices will become permanent. For that is what eternity means. So you existed before the world, and you will still be here after the world. Do you know what that means? It means that you are not just a moment in the life of the world. Rather, the world is a moment in your life. The church has been at pains through the millennia to remind you that this world is not your home. You're just passing through. And though the new heavens and the new earth are formed from this one, they are new. There is a decisive break. And when we awake from the slumber of our sin and the death that is the due penalty for it, that morning will be so unlike any we knew before that it will almost be funny that we call the earlier shadows morning. Right? You'll look around at the new world and you'll recognize everything, and you'll marvel that you thought to call anything before by those names. Right? Why did I say that anything was good in this world? Look at that. That is what good is. That's what I meant. That's what I was reaching after when I said good all those times. Look around you. This world isn't your proper world. It's just your first world. The most insidious of the 7 deadly sins, the hardest one to recognize and be delivered from, is sloth. Sloth doesn't mean laziness. That is not in the sense of sitting on the couch and watching the game when you know you ought to be out cutting the grass. I mean, that may be sinful. If you're worried that is sinful, it probably is sinful for you because it's probably your conscience getting angry. But it's not because that's what sloth is. That's a different problem. No, sloth is a moral laxity, a fundamental, I can't even, that saps the wind from the sails of the spiritual life. Sloth falls back into old patterns because they are familiar and therefore easy. You know what I mean? You have that sin, that thing you do, that you pray over and over to be delivered from, and you get a breakthrough, and for a time you're free from it, and then you have a hard day, and you're right back there again. Maybe it's just me. Sloth is a vicious laziness that contents itself with appearances and refuses to ask questions of ultimate importance. Sloth is the reason most of the people you know who aren't believers aren't believers. Sloth is contentment with this world when your eyes should be constantly seeking another. But here's the thing. Throughout the weekend, we presenters keep bringing you back to the incarnation. And by the way, incarnation is not a genre of things. It is a historical event. It is the historical event. It is the privileged moment of history that communicates to all of history its meaning and intelligibility. It is the interpretive principle through which all of reality must be read. And because of the incarnation, we do not look for the coming world anywhere other than in this world. Not because this world is the coming world, not because the kingdom is now, and we are presently there, and heaven is here, and everything's good. If only you'd open your eyes to see it. That's the height of laziness. And it's also a kind of forgetfulness. You were promised more than you have now. This life you have now does not respond to the magnificent promises of God. So don't settle for it. Rather, it is because this world exists to point us to that other world. Look, the Pevensies were brought to Narnia so that they might learn to see God better in their own world. It was hard to see God in post-war England, but by getting to know him in another world, it became easier to recognize him amidst the rubble of the more mundane England. The right use of the world is to be led by close attention to the little glories of the world to see the larger and truer world, of which this world is but a shadow and an intimation. And to do that, we need to approach the world in wonder. Wonder is the native disposition of a child's heart and is the most urgent attribute of childlikeness. It is hard to have such a heart. The dynamics of daily living and the necessities of the adult world work continually to wear such hearts down. Growing up is so often a process of forgetting that strips our hearts of the power to wonder. It started innocently enough, right? The most natural thing when one hears of a wonder is that one conceives of a desire to go and see it. We could not be expected to look at those beautifully illuminated maps with their beckoning inscriptions of "Here be dragons" and not hop on a ship to go see if we could find them. But we did it all wrong. We searched out of hearts filled with the desire of mastery and conquest, not with hearts made soft and open by submission and humility. We sought for wonder in the world of objective sense and reduced everything we found to objects of scientific study. It is not clear when we cross the line from appreciating the surface of things to being so devoted to their surface that we denied their depth. It is not clear when we sacrificed their meaning to the mere fact of their existence. But sacrifice it we did, and this was the beginning of doom. Right? We remembered that the world was round. We remembered it as if we had just discovered it when we'd known for ages. And we reasoned that a world that was round had no corners. And so there were no places where the dragons could be hiding. If they inhabited the corners of the map, then they didn't live in our cornerless world at all and were excluded by definition. We inherited dragons and fairies and unicorns and fawns, but we threw them away, exchanged them for a meager ration of technical control, an empty dream that feeds our rebellious longing to be like God apart from God, a project founded upon a contradiction in terms. So we subjected ourselves to a rigorous project of disbelieving, refusing to accept anything that we had not seen for ourselves or could not prove with our senses. We created for ourselves the fiction of objectivity, convincing ourselves that we were being impartial when in fact we were being unconcerned. We tried to make the facts the bearers of meaning, cutting out the necessary intermediate stage of truth. And we subjected the world to a thorough process of disenchantment, refusing to allow it to be anything other than what it seemed to be, denying all its mysteries, reducing them to known processes. We expelled God, angels, and demons from the realms of the causes, preferring to speak of the immediate causes of things as the only causes of things. Thus did we strip wonder from the world, and more seriously, from our own souls. This is the crisis of wonder, that we have spent so much of our lives reducing wonders to things known, to been there, done that, to the tyranny of the familiar. Why, it's just rain, we say. When did you forget that it's ridiculous that water falls from the sky? Why should we plunge headlong into the descent that Macbeth's evil cast him into? Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. A crisis is a decisive moment, or better, a moment for deciding. The crisis of wonder is not that wonder will disappear from the world, for it is newborn in the world with every child coming into it. And the process of stripping the world down to an unremarkable sameness engine will have to take place for as long as new human persons come to be. Because wonder is our birthright and can never really be lost, it can only be thrown away. No, the crisis of wonder is the existential question posed to each of you by the manifold workings of the Spirit of God, of which my remarks today are just the most recent entry. That question is this: will you be a person of wonder? Will you be a person open to the grandness and majesty of a world that, though less than you, still exceeds your capacity to know or understand? Will you let what you know not be the boundary of your thinking, but the ground from which you pursue new thoughts out of a curiosity that longs not to capture, but to be captured? Not to check off items, but to be blown where the wind wills, because there is sure to be something worth seeing there. The angels are a wonder people, and it has been written on their names, been written on their very being. Why do you ask my name, seeing as it is wonderful? The desert that oppresses you is not the dryness of the world, but of your own heart. That heart is your worst enemy, not the legions of hell. It will keep you wrestling with God when you ought to have submitted, or it will make you too tired to bother wrestling with him at all. But the river that makes glad the city of God, and so that it's also sufficient to make glad the little village of your heart, is wonder. Open your hearts, people of God. Be filled with the world and be led to see it anew as a realm of wonders. Thank you.